Good evening. My name is Brett Provenzano, and I am a very proud superintendent of the Fairport Central School District. Tonight is a very important meeting. Tonight is an opportunity for us to share our priorities. It's an opportunity for us to collaborate and communicate with the community. We have an incredible partnership with the Chemical Prevention Advisory Council, or CPAC. For the past 29 years, we have collaborated with CPAC in this district. It speaks to our heart, it speaks to our values, because we passionately want to make sure that we are constantly reinforcing the importance of healthy life choices. We know more than ever that it's complicated. Life is different. For the past 29 years, this collaboration has emphasized the importance of wellness and healthy life choices. I would like all of the CPAC members who are here tonight, who volunteer their time, to please stand up. Thank you so much for your dedication and commitment. The ideas in our children's minds will rule their world. It is up to us to put the right ideas in their minds. It is up to you as parents to understand exactly what's happening in their world, to have context in their world, so you can be the best parent you could be for your child, so you can be informed of what's happening in our schools. I would also like to take a moment to recognize those people who are with our children in the schools, and that is our school administrators. We have our principals here. Are they here? Can we please? Bob Clark, please stand up. Dave Dunn, Pat Groh, Ms. Serrani. And we also have our Director of Student Services, Mrs. Deb Miles. Please stand up. Where are you, Deb? I tell you what, this is so comfortable for me, because this is where we need to be as a community. As a father and as an educational leader, this is the information that we want to share with parents, that we want to make sure that you know that in our schools, the leaders that just stood up, the leaders that are representing and supporting our schools, this is their priorities, to make sure that we collaborate with parents, that you are aware of what occurs in their daily lives. You improve, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a musician, whether you're an artist, by focusing inward. As a parent, you improve by focusing inward. And this is our opportunity tonight as we review the data from the Youth at Risk Survey and hear from our other special guests. It's an opportunity for you to reflect on what is occurring in the context of your children's lives. I'm proud of our partnership. I'm proud of the messages that we share with our students, because our students are living messages that we send into the future. And we need to make sure that our messages continue to be positive, that they promote healthy life choices. And I'm very appreciative of our Board of Education, who allows this to be the priority. We, or the Board of Education, wants to make sure that our programming, the things that occur during the school, after school, as much as we can control, that we are doing all we can for our students. So I would like to thank our Board of Education. And finally, tonight is about giving you resources so you could be the best parent that you could be. Starting conversations, understanding networks, understanding, again, the context of their lives, so you can ask questions, have positive and healthy conversations with them. Right now, I would like to introduce two of our co-presidents, Jim Murphy and Mrs. Deborah Tandoy. But before I introduce them and bring them forward, I need to say thank you for their leadership. So much happens. Deb has been a part of this partnership for the past 29 years. She has single-handedly carried this mission. Her love, her passion, and her heart is in this work. And it takes that idea, that passion, so we can all be better, so we can touch and connect with our kids. So without further ado, Deborah Tandoy and Jim Murphy. You're okay too.
Good evening and thank you for coming. A couple of administrative things real quick. As is typical, if you come to any concerts, plays, anything like that, please make sure that you take notice to the emergency exits on either side of the front, as well as at the ends of either aisle or the back of the auditorium. As you came in, each one of you should have received a parent toolkit. And while there's going to be a lot of information, not only presented tonight in the package, as well as on the table in the back, there are also some opportunities for you to give us some feedback or for you to participate as well. Inside the packet on the right side, there's going to be a small pencil and an index card. As the evening goes on, please write down questions on those index cards. There will be folks, myself being one of them, in the aisles throughout the evening, so we will be collecting them, culminating with the panel up here at the end, toward the end of the program. In addition, on the back of the agenda, also on the right side of the parent toolkit, there's an opportunity for you to provide us some feedback. So please jot down some thoughts as the program is going on. On the table in the hallway outside, there is a basket. Please make sure that you submit that, you drop that in the basket on your way out so that we can receive that. We've been doing these community meetings for quite a few years. The feedback is very helpful for us to continue to evolve and to improve the programs that we're providing. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you so much for coming out tonight. It is just so important that you're here. We keep hearing it over and over again. Sobering statistics. Every 4 minutes, someone in the U.S. dies of a drug or alcohol addiction. Over 20 million Americans are suffering from an addiction, and 23 million are in recovery right now. 1 in 3 households are personally impacted by an addiction. And families of loss is now the fastest growing group in America. So why is that so important? Why tonight? Why now? It's because 90% of addiction begins with adolescence. 90%. So, as everyone said, we've been working at this for many years, and we put together a video to share with you tonight about the work that we do. And if you see a way that you can help and get involved, we certainly encourage you all just to hear what we have to say and really be those advocates out there, because we are in a crisis and we need your help. So I want to give a shout out to Tony Exton, who has worked tirelessly on putting together our new CPAC video. Thank you.
29 years ago, we developed our formula for success. Each month, gathered, committed individuals from all segments of our community invested in working together to promote positive, productive, safe, and healthy lives for all. The Chemical Prevention Advisory Council, CPAC, was established in 1988 as a partnership promoting wellness and healthy lifestyles while addressing alcohol and other drug use and abuse. CPAC members include representatives from schools, government, law enforcement, families, and students. Parents and teens play an active role in creating strategies to reduce high-risk behaviors. You recognize our work as establishing drug-free school zones, Red Ribbon Week activities, our Parents Who Host Lose the Most campaign, presenting at parent open houses and community meetings, Safe Homes, our parent networking program, and our 40 developmental asset focus for positive youth development. Our community has great kids. We owe it to all our youth to become informed about the pressures they face every day and to become equipped with strategies and tools to support them.
As superintendent of the Fairport Central School District, I am proud to say that our number one priority is to put students' well-being at the forefront of all that we do. We want them to be successful academically, but more importantly, when they leave our schools, we want them to be life-ready. We want all of our students to be healthy, safe, and strong. Strong in mind, body, and spirit, so they can make healthy life choices as they live their lives. We do this by our partnerships. We have strong partnerships with organizations like the Chemical Prevention Advisory Committee. CPAC is an incredible example of how in Fairport we work together to make sure that our students have the very best in the classroom, in the hallways, outside of school, and throughout the community. We're proud of our partnership, and we look forward to building upon it every year so our students can be the benefactors of this collaborative effort of working together.
Alcohol is the most commonly used drug among adolescents. In fact, alcohol kills more teens than all other illegal drugs combined.
More than 67% of young people who start drinking before the age of 15 will try an illicit drug. So, alcohol is a gateway drug to harder and more dangerous illegal substances.
We need all our students to come to school at their best, and we know that drugs and alcohol can impair that ability for them. The teen brain is much more vulnerable than the adult brain, and any combination with alcohol and drugs impacts their ability to learn. The CPAC committee and the community, we all try to work together to see the whole picture by informing parents and also supporting our students and helping them get through some of the tough decisions that are going to be presented with.
Electronic cigarettes or e-cigs are drug delivery devices. They heat up liquid nicotine, a highly addictive drug, into a vapor, which is then inhaled when vaping. E-cigarettes serve as a pathway to nicotine addiction for youth. Many students are getting addicted to them.
I actually know of some students who are buying them with prepaid credit cards and having them sent to their friends' house so that they won't get in trouble with their parents.
The result of what we're trying to do through CPAC and as a community is to give young people the tools that they need to make healthy, good choices. Hopefully we've done that through example and through valuing them so that they can value themselves.
As supervisor of the town of Barrington, I believe the health and safety of all of our citizens is important. Our dedication to CPAC helps us listen to our youth, our school administrators, the parents, and others who work to set a direction for our community. We build a culture, a Fairport family, and we strive for nothing but the best for everyone, no matter who lives here, especially our youth.
Our teen center is very valuable to our community because it provides many opportunities for students to succeed.
As a judge in the Fairport parenting community, I'm concerned about legal rights and responsibilities. We all share the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but these rights come with responsibilities to ourselves and our community. Unfortunately, irresponsible behavior like teen drinking and drug abuse often cause long-term unhappiness and sometimes even the loss of life. Too often I see that poor choices and risk behaviors bring serious trouble for teens and their families. With the aid of CPAC, we're striving to encourage healthy lifestyles and reduce teen risk behaviors so that our kids can live their lives in the pursuit of happiness.
Marijuana is the most widely used and illegal drug among youth and is more potent than ever. Although sometimes perceived as a harmless and natural drug, the fact remains that today's marijuana is more addictive and stronger than ever.
Don't be fooled by legalization. Of the teens and young adults admitted to treatment facilities, marijuana is a primary diagnosis for admission and drug dependence.
Because we care about our kids, emergency personnel come together to show the dangers of alcohol and drug use.
The Fairport Police Department is a proud member of the CPAC committee that offers education and awareness to our youth here locally in Fairport. As part of that initiative, we've sponsored the pharmaceutical drop-off program here at the police department, offering our residents the opportunity to drop off unused medicines, prescription drugs. Since 2010, we've received over 8 tons of pharmaceuticals, which would have otherwise been available to our youth
Over the past few years, we have realized an increase of students who are experiencing depression and anxiety. We also know that students use drugs and alcohol to mask these feelings and to address social needs. In Fairport, we are committed to supporting students in the area of mental health and wellness. We have implemented a number of programs and supports to help with building resiliency, regulating emotions, and accessing professional support. In doing so, we have partnered with Strong Behavioral Health to provide a mental health clinic within our district and consultation to staff to support our students in the classroom. We are able to build upon these efforts by networking with the CPAC committee.
I love being on a committee that focuses collectively as a community on this effort every single month.
I think faith helps teens to know that they have hope throughout all the struggles that we face in today's society. I think faith helps teens to know that they are valued no matter what anyone else at school will tell them.
2/3 of teens say that losing their parents' respect is the number one reason that they don't drink. Yes, parents, you have a significant impact on your children's decision-making.
Honestly, parents just really need to talk to their kids about this stuff. It might be tough to talk about, but if you just have the conversation about drugs and alcohol, then they're going to be 50% less likely to use any of it.
Throughout my life, I've had many great adult role models that have kept me on the right path. Just make sure your kids have great role models that they can look up to.
Principals and staff are all involved in working together. Why? Because we care about all kids.
But on the good side, while this data is alarming, we recognize that there are many youth who have decided to stay healthy and are committed to a great plan. And with the continued dedication to CPAC, we can add even more students to that group.
Parents, the best thing you can do to keep your child healthy is...
Students who reported having a drink of alcohol other than a few sips, excluding religious purposes, at the high school level, 929 of 1,793 kids who took the test, and at the middle school level, 127 of 1,301 kids who took the test.
Students reported having 5 or more drinks in a row over the past 30 days. 340 at the high school level and 36 at the middle school level.
Students who reported using marijuana in their lifetime. High school, 533, middle school, 48.
Students who have ever used an e-cig. High school, 691. Middle school, 99.
The number of students reporting taking any drugs or pills to get high that was prescribed for someone else. For high school, 141. For middle school, 45. The number of students that have reported using heroin. At the high school level, 27, and at the middle school level, 12.
Students reported using any form of over-the-counter drugs to get high, like cough medicine. 81 high school students, 31 middle school students.
Students who have reported hurting themselves on purpose by cutting, burning, or bruising without the intention of committing suicide. High school, 430. Middle school, 262.
Students reporting they actually attempted suicide. 109 at the high school, 74 at the middle school, even though 240 middle school students and 320 high school students thought about it.
If a student attempted suicide, these students' attempt resulted in injury, poisoning, or overdose that had to be treated by a doctor or nurse. High school, 39. Middle school, 27.
Students who breathe 1 ounce of aerosol spray cans, sniff, computer, over minutes, or any one piece of spray to get high. High school, 110. Middle school, 95.
Energy drinks have unsafe amounts of caffeine. Safe limits are 45 to 85 milligrams a day. Energy drinks range from 215 to 242 milligrams per can. High school, 282. Middle school, 483.
Students who reported having ever had sexual intercourse. High school, 409. Middle school, 52. Students who have participated in oral sex, given or received. High school, 538. Middle school, 53.
Students who reported using a cell phone, computer, or other electronic device to send/post or receive nude or semi-nude pictures of self or someone else. High school, 1,003. Middle school, 247.
All right. You guys hear me? Everybody hear me? All right. Hi, my name is Jordan O'Connor. I'm a junior at Fairport High School. And drugs, alcohol, and suicide are topics that our society likes to avoid. However, these topics are eating away slowly in our community. The impact of drugs and alcohol at the middle and high school level is all too real. Our society is oblivious to these impacts, and this is why we're here.
Fairport completed their 12th Youth Risk Behavior Survey. It is designed by the Center for Disease Control, and we take it in partnership with the Monroe County Health Department. The survey shows multiple behaviors that can harm students, such as drugs and alcohol. We have longitudinal data since 1995, and years of results show trends in behavior, which validates youth honesty in their answers. It is completely anonymous. We go into an area, and the computers are all signed onto the survey so we have no identifying information. We have shown you a sample of the current data and how things escalate as students get older. We chose 4 areas of most concern to talk to you about tonight.
Hi, my name is Lauren, and I'm a junior at the high school.
Hi, my name is Emma, and I'm a senior at the high school.
Hi, my name is Jack, and I'm a junior at high school. The thing about alcohol is that it's everywhere for our kids these days. Parents buy it for kids, kids buy it for other kids, adults offer it to kids. It's the most commonly used drug among teens, and it's so easy to get.
With the school year in full swing, parties are also beginning to pick up. And as Jack stated, alcohol is the #1 drug used among adolescents. So as alcohol is available to kids at these parties, it's important that parents, you guys have the facts to educate your kids and to help them through these situations when they become present.
Like Emma said, alcohol is given full access at these parties that the high schoolers are going to, and that's a mention for binge drinking, which can be prevalent all throughout the high school. And actually, this was an example at one of the homecoming events outside of school. There was a party, and kids were voluntarily letting people lift them up on tables and dropping to the floor, like throw them down and then bring them back to the floor.
It's on, yay, okay. Carly Payne, grade 11. I'm Emma Kelly, I'm a sophomore. I'm Lindsay Latore, and I am a sophomore. Marijuana may not be as easily bought as alcohol is, but it is still very prevalent at both the high school and the middle school level. Marijuana is the most widely used illicit drug among youth and more potent than ever. The potency of marijuana has increased from 1 to 2% in the 1960s to 15% or higher today. Pot contains 400 known chemicals and at least 150 carcinogens.
National research demonstrates that illegal drug use among youth increases as the perception of its risk decreases. 1 in 10 people who try marijuana become addicted to it, but this statistic rises to 1 in 6 for youth.
Students who use marijuana have difficulty paying attention and are proven to have worse overall grades than students who don't use marijuana. Driving under the influence of marijuana is associated with 92% increased risk of vehicular crashes. And marijuana users are significantly more likely to develop chronic mental health disorders like depression, anxiety, psychosis than non-users. It is important to have this conversation with your child, even if you think, oh, they're not part of that group. Because they will more than likely than not find themselves in a situation where it will be offered to them. Personally, I don't think I'm part of one of those groups, but I've had more than my fair situations where I have been either offered to smoke or people around me have been smoking. And I've known what to do because I've had the conversation with my parents.
I'm Eden, and I'm a sophomore.
I'm Caitlin, and I'm a senior.
I'm Holly, and I'm a junior. Sorry, I had a sexual game last night, I was screaming. E-cigs have become more and more popular, especially in Fairport. It has become scarce to hear people say things like, hey, do you want to go to the mall, or let's hang out sometime. The new question is, hey, do you want to smoke with me? I personally have heard this said, well, by the people sitting next to me during a class one day. It is partly because e-cigs are marketed towards teens and young adults. After we collected the data, we compared our data to surrounding towns, and it showed that Fairport has the highest e-cig use in the county. E-cigs are no joke.
E-cigs are battery-operated drug delivery devices that resemble cigarettes. They're designed to deliver nicotine, flavor, and other chemicals by heating a liquid to a vapor. The user inhales a vapor and blows out smoke. Many people modify the liquid to include marijuana. Kids are smoking marijuana in their e-cigs. Because vapor is odorless, kids are getting high without detection from adults or teachers.
E-cigs are not approved by the FDA, who have warned that e-cigs contain ingredients that are known to be toxic to humans. The CDC stated that nicotine is a highly addictive drug. Teens who start with e-cigs may be condemned to struggle with lifelong addiction to nicotine and other conventional cigarettes. Currently, kids are becoming so addicted that they sometimes can't go 6 hours in school without smoking. Kids hide them in their sleeves, their socks, and their textbooks. I personally know of kids that order them online and ship them to their friends' houses and put the boxes at the end of the street so their parents don't find out.
Hi, I'm Taylor and I'm a junior.
I'm Alana and I'm a junior.
And I'm Luna and I'm a sophomore. So last year, my freshman year of high school, there was going to be a pharmaceutical party, also known as a farm party. This is where you bring a pill to a party, you put it in a bowl, and you take a pill out. You then ingest this pill and then carry on with your night. These unknown substances would then be mixed with alcohol, which is extremely dangerous and also life-threatening.
Prescription drugs are closely related to heroin because the chemicals that are in both of them are relatively similar. In fact, 80% of people that are addicted to heroin started taking prescription drugs first. They got addicted to the heroin so easily because of the similarities. In other words, prescription drugs can easily lead to a heroin addiction.
So in 2015, close to 23,000 people died from a pain medication overdose, and an alarming amount of these people were ages 15 to 24. So if you think about it, that is pretty much high school through college, so that's like us.
90 people die each day from an opioid overdose, which includes prescription medicine, painkillers, and heroin. You've probably heard about the Ohio fentanyl story. Fentanyl is a strong opioid, and it's 30 to 50 times stronger than heroin. They're running out of space in morgues in Ohio due to the amount of fatal fentanyl overdoses. People are ingesting it due to cocaine and heroin being laced with it. We're telling you this because of how big of an issue it is and because of how heroin doses are increasing.
These prescription drugs are used by teens to get high, and the majority of these teens find them in their home medicine cabinets. Although the numbers show that kids are doing this, there are plenty of kids who choose not to do it and stay on the right path.
As our data confirmed, we see a definite rise in the level of reported feelings of depression and anxiety in our youth. People who abuse alcohol and drugs do it to change the way they feel, to alter perceptions of reality in ways that feel pleasant, and make them forget about the stress and anxieties in their life. Drug use may temporarily satisfy emotional or social needs, and students may use drugs to mask mental health issues. To gain a perspective on the mental health status of our youth, we encourage you to watch the YouTube video, If You Really Knew Me, Fairport High School, where students were anonymously asked to complete a card with the title, If You Really Knew Me, and would write down something that no one else would know about them. You also have a full flyer in your parent toolkit inviting you to attend our Stressed Out presentation on November 15th at Martha Brown to learn more on mental health of our youth.
So right now you're probably sitting there really shocked about all the statistics that you're hearing. Don't worry, there's still hope. There's still many kids that didn't choose the wrong path. But the kids that did choose the wrong path just needed some love and support to help them choose the right path. So tonight I just ask you to go home and show your kids some love and care so they have a better chance to choose the right path.
Hello, my name is Liz Russell and I'm the Substance Abuse Prevention Social Worker for the district. I have the privilege of working with all of your students and they are wonderful and I learn from them every day. Last year, the Henderson family reached out to us and told us they wanted to tell our story. And tell their story they did. They presented for 2 straight days, 9 periods in a row, and they shared their story with our students. The feedback we received from our students was wonderful, and tonight the Hendersons are going to share their story with you. So I'm going to invite the Hendersons to come up, and I'll let them tell you more.
Good evening. Maybe the most important thing we can say tonight is we never expected to be up here talking about this. Our oldest son, Alex, was a Fairport grad. He had lots of great friends at Fairport. He had a wonderful girlfriend. He was co-captain of the Fairport tennis team that won sectionals. He periodically bought food and gave it out to the homeless. He volunteered as Santa at a skilled nursing facility. And on his 22nd birthday, my wife, Alex's mom, found Alex on our couch in the basement in front of the TV. He had died of an accidental overdose of heroin and fentanyl. Chris gave him CPR. She came and got me, I gave him CPR. EMTs gave him CPR, but we couldn't bring him back. In the wake of Alex's passing, we got a number of questions, which is great. 2 of the more common ones were, how can this happen? And how can I, as a parent, try to prevent it? So our family, my wife Chris, our son Charlie, and I decided to produce a video to help teens and their families avoid the path of addiction. So I guess we're going to look at the video now, and then I'm just going to have a few additional comments after the video.
Young people are dying. They're overdosing on heroin and fentanyl. You wonder, how did this young person get to this horrible spot in life? Let's turn back the clock. Go back in time, to younger days, to understand how addiction starts, to understand how to prevent it from happening. While each addiction situation is different, there are generally 3 ingredients. First, teens have a lot to cope with. Many teenagers are trying to figure out, who am I? What is my identity? And there is stress. When teens were asked, they said the #1 reason they use drugs was to deal with the pressures and stress of school. And some teens have to cope with stress at home. There could be emotional neglect, abuse, divorce, a family member with an illness, a family member who's addicted, the death of a loved one, money troubles, or other challenges. Many teens also need to cope with depression or social anxiety. In addition to a lot to cope with, some teenagers, through no fault of their own, have poor coping skills. Maybe their parent or parents have been caught up in their work or other family crises and do not even realize that their teenage child needs help. Maybe their parent or parents are struggling themselves and are simply not able to teach their kids how to constructively cope with life. And teens who experience day-to-day depression or social anxiety may develop an unwarranted negative self-image. This can make it tougher to cope. The 3rd ingredient to addiction that may be present is certain brain chemistry. Some people, by virtue of how their brain processes chemicals, get hooked easier. You can attribute this to your family tree, otherwise known as genetics. Genetic susceptibility doesn't have to be present for a teen to develop addiction, but it can increase their chances. All 3 of these pieces do not have to be present for addiction to happen. Any one piece, if strong enough, can lead a teen down the addiction path. So how does addiction start? Here's what happens. A teen has a lot to cope with and poor coping skills. They try alcohol and drugs. Maybe their brain chemistry causes them to be more susceptible. The teen's brain learns that, at least in the short term, the alcohol or drugs gives them a way to temporarily neglect or forget the stresses in their life, which is a flawed way of coping. That can become their identity. The party friend who is willing to try anything, or the friend who can get you drugs. It might give them a way to fit in socially and have fun. It might help them for a moment forget about their stress. The teen starts using alcohol or drugs more frequently. This is where things come apart. Repeated use does three things. The teen's brain has learned that, in the short term, alcohol and drugs can help them cope. With repeated use, this bad learning loop becomes ingrained and deeper. The teenager gets to the point of automatically reaching for alcohol or drugs when they're stressed, without even thinking about it. With repeated use, the chemicals in alcohol and drugs also change the brain, making the teenager even less self-aware of how they're going off the rails. And repeated use makes life situations worse, which just increases stress and feeds into the negative loop. Without a change, this path ends in addiction, jail, or death. 1 out of 10 adults struggle with addiction. Addiction leads to broken families, broken promises, and broken hearts, and currently, an increasing number of deaths. So how do we prevent this from happening? How do we prevent addiction? Here's how. First, a message for parents. Spend concentrated one-on-one time with your kids, particularly when they get into middle school and all through high school and college. Truly listen to them with love and without judgment. Understand what they are coping with. Help them get through. If you need help, talk to an experienced professional. Do not wait. Act now. And remember, your child could simply be experimenting and have a brain more susceptible to alcohol and drugs. It could be that simple and scary. Or your child could be going through something that you're not fully aware of. There is inevitably a lot going through their head. When you get in a car accident in the wintertime, the accident doesn't happen when you hit the telephone pole. It happens 200 feet before that when you start skidding on the ice. Your child may be skidding right now, and neither they nor you even recognize it. Act now. Do not assume they can self-correct. They need an established support system. Listen to them and help them immediately. Now, a message for teenagers. You are not alone. It may feel that way. Who else could be going through this or having these thoughts? But whatever you're experiencing, many others have experienced this too, and they've come out happy on the other end. Do not take on the identity of the party friend. It will kill you. You can find an identity without drug and alcohol dependency. Your true identity, a better identity. Finally, be open to receiving help from your family, a friend, or from a professional, wherever it comes from. When your body has an illness, you see a doctor. When your body has an injury, you see a physical therapist. But what about your brain? When you're on a bad path, a therapist can help you get on the positive one. The therapist can help you step back, gain perspective, and develop strong coping skills, no matter what life throws your way, like a personal trainer for the brain. Getting help is a strength, not a weakness. You deserve to be truly happy. You deserve to be comfortable with your own thoughts. You can be. Peace and love, in memory of our oldest son, Alex.
So in Alex's situation, it was a matter of experimentation, a little bit of thrill-seeking, I guess, and having a brain more susceptible to addiction. Briefly, we've got 5 suggestions, and a bunch of them sound like parenting 101, and they are. One is, do spend concentrated time with your kids, one-on-one, away from everything. Really listen, truly listen. Do it through middle school, do it through high school, and do it through college. Alex was a business major at RIT, and starting in his sophomore year, he lived off campus. And there are some apartmentals off campus that are only during the months of the school year. Alex had a 12-month rental, so he wasn't living with us in the summer. And while we saw Alex in the summer, because he worked out of Eastview, Because he wasn't living with us, we didn't see the patterns of behavior that he was falling into. So stay very, very close, listen, get away with them where all distractions are gone. Number 2 suggestion is obviously, please feel free to tell your kids Alex's story. As you set expectations with them, love them, Fairport kids can die. Number 3 is if you have a history of substance abuse in your family tree, consider telling your teenager. If it was diabetes, you tell them. Your teen will see other teens drinking beer and not having a problem with it. There are some kids, through no fault of their own, that just do not have the ability to sort of step back, have an epiphany at some point after making some mistakes, and self-correct. So do not assume they can self-correct. Watch for a pattern of behavior early on. And there's a phrase that addiction starts with a red beer cup. There's another phrase that the seeds of addiction are there before someone even takes a drink or tries their first drug. The 4th suggestion, you all know this one. When your kids do dumb things, they're really not thinking about you at all. That will help you listen. And there may be a very important reason they're doing dumb things. It may not just be a sort of a teenage thing. And then the 5th suggestion is if what your child needs is beyond what you can do for them in terms of helping them cope and helping them get through things, hook them up with a experienced, no-nonsense counselor or therapist so that they can step back, get some perspective, understand what they're doing, and understand that picture of stress, triggers, actions, all of that. So those are 5 brief suggestions that we would have. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Barb Christensen, and I'm the coordinator for the Finger Lakes Prevention Resource Center at the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, and a proud member of CPAC for many years. It's my privilege tonight to introduce Craig Johnson, your keynote speaker tonight. And so rather than read his whole resume, which would take up most of the evening, I'm only going to hit the highlights. In addition to being a licensed mental health counselor, he's also a credentialed substance abuse counselor as well. He's an adjunct professor at numerous colleges, and he is, let me get the title right, Chief Medical Operations and New Initiatives Officer at Huther Doyle Memorial Institute. And I've known Craig for many years, and I think that you will be really intrigued and thrilled to hear him this evening. He's always a wonderful speaker, and I'm sure I'm going to enjoy him as well as you will tonight.
Thank you, Barb, for the introduction, and certainly it's been a wonderful program so far here tonight, hasn't it? I'm very impressed with not only the extensive information, but the presentation and the style and the efforts that obviously went into putting all of this this together, and for good reason. I mean, it is today, I think, that our president announced that we are in an emergency, I think was the term, right? We've heard epidemic, we've heard crisis, we've heard a health situation, a number of conditions, and I think the term today, if I recall, was a national emergency. Particularly regarding opiates, but certainly, as we've heard tonight, and as I'll reflect on a little bit as well, other substances are very much of concern, and particularly with young people. There were a lot of facts and a lot of information that's been discussed so far, but we certainly have seen in recent years probably the most notable, the most, I guess, kind of the loudest, and maybe in some ways the greatest tragedies that have occurred in regards to the opiates. The drug scene is changing so quickly and so dramatically, like I guess so many other things these days. In fact, I just saw an article came across my desk today that in Minnesota they're now finding substantial amounts of fentanyl in marijuana. So, you know, as was also mentioned a little bit earlier, the marijuana that you or a peer of yours or whatever may have tried some years ago is certainly not the marijuana of today. And not only has the level of THC gone up geometrically, but now we're finding all kinds of additives, including fentanyl, which, as was mentioned, is many times the potency of heroin, highly addictive, and essentially designed as a painkiller to be taken transdermally, which is, by the way, a very ineffective way of ingesting a drug. So you have to have, like a nicotine patch as well, you have to have a very high dosage of that medicine to do the job. Well, if you take that and you smoke it or inject it or what have you, we're seeing just these tragedies lately. And in fact, the Narcan, people might be familiar with Narcan. It's a remedial application if somebody appears to be overdosing. In fact, this is happening so often that if somebody comes in looking like they're unconscious or very blurry and almost unconscious, the first application typically is the Narcan, because it does very little other than reverse the effects of an opiate overdose. What we're hearing from some of the first responders that one blast, one inhalation of the Narcan isn't working. 2, 3, 4 are often needed to try to reverse the effects of fentanyl, which is being found in Monroe County as well. To a large extent. In fact, the folks that look at substances that are confiscated by law enforcement and so on have identified that typically in street heroin there are about a dozen other substances, including on occasion strychnine, including quite often things such as PCP and fentanyl and various other kinds of synthetic drugs. We truly do have an epidemic with the opiates. And it's a very tricky one because in some cases the development of an addiction to an opiate is the part of the process that people have talked about. This progression that can occur. And the video, I think, did a very nice job of describing how somebody can be susceptible, either psychologically or biologically, a combination of those perhaps, and be introduced to the drug, and it just sort of seems to take effect for them in ways that are different than it does for other people, right? I mean, we all know folks for whom this has been the case, our brother-in-law, our buddy from college, perhaps us in some ways. And then we get this progression, and that can also often involve increased uses of a particular substance, or even moving on to other substances, okay? Well, recently with this opiate epidemic, it's been a little bit of a fooler. Because some people move into the dependency, the addiction on opiates in that more traditional kind of pathway, i.e. cigarettes, alcohol, club drugs, opiates, sort of in that progression. Not that everybody goes that way, but some do. But we've been fooled here over the last few years because we've seen the athlete, the field hockey player at Nazareth, for instance, that blows out a knee. And a lot of her aspirations and a lot of the things that she enjoyed are now gone. So she's depressed because she's lost that. And, unfortunately, she may have a healthcare provider who provides her with large doses or continuous doses of painkillers. Not a good combination, as you can imagine. Somebody who's kind of depressed and forlorn about changes in their life and not being able to do something that they love to do. And here are a number of highly addictive substances. And in fact, with the opiates, you can become physiologically dependent in maybe 10 or 12 days. Very rapid course, and a very rapid progression into escalating tolerance, so it takes more of the same drug. And just run out that story, and we can see how that athlete and a nice co-ed college, who may not have been a real partier or anything of that nature, may not have even seemed to have some of the susceptibility at an earlier age, is now addicted to painkillers and is informed by some of her distributors that heroin is much cheaper, and in fact, if you inject it, you even get so much more bang for your buck. I present that kind of scenario just because I think it demonstrates how for some, This process is one that is almost innocent. We do understand that addictive illnesses are illnesses. People can and do recover. That's, I guess, the good news, if you will, on some of this. And the illnesses, as they develop, become very pervasive, seem to take over more and more of a person's life. So any of us that have lived with addiction, as I have a son who's in recovery. And we understand, I'm in recovery myself, and we understand that what happens, a lot of behaviors begin to change, and we get the sketchiness, and the lies, and the deceit, and the money starts coming up missing, and you know, all these kinds of things start to happen that are some of these clues. But of course, remember, the person that's abusing the substance, their full-time job is for you, mom and dad, to not find out. Okay? So maybe if, you know, if this does surface, some of us ask, gosh, why didn't I see this? I should have known better. Shouldn't I have done something before this? Well, again, the intention is for you to not see what's going on. Because if you did, that would certainly threaten the behavior of perhaps your son or your daughter. So we have this emergency, we have this epidemic, and again, sort of at the lead of the pack are opiates. Number one cause of death up till a few years ago for young people was, of course, car accidents, many of which involved alcohol, a whole set of tragedies in and of themselves. Today, number one cause of death for young people is overdose, drug overdoses. But this is a bigger challenge than it first seems. It's easy, in a sense, it's easy in some ways to talk about our kids because we're all interested in our kids. We all want them to be happy and functional and healthy adults. But you know that the cohort of child-raising aged adults in the United States is a cohort that is the largest consumer of substances in the history of our country. America's kids don't have a drug problem. America has a drug problem. So I'll say it to the challenge to parents. Of course, it has to start with ourselves and our own behavior. Does that mean taking a walk around the block instead of a martini at night? Maybe. Does that mean saying no? Well, come on, Mom, you uptight, you smoke weed. Come on, if your kid's coming over, smoke the weed. Nobody. Maybe. Does that mean being informed and working with your child or others in your family or your circle in terms of prescription drugs? Does that mean going over to your elderly mother-in-law's house and looking through her cabinet and finding that there are 180 OxyContin sitting there in a jar? And your kid and some other kids are going over to that house from time to time? Maybe. Maybe it does. Maybe it means a lot of those things. But I want to also talk for a couple minutes about recovery. What Barb did mention, I was in the jail for many years. I ran the jail program with Sheriff Maloney. Awesome, a wonderful man. And Sheriff O'Flynn more recently, of course. And about 85% of the people that end up in the criminal justice system have substance abuse problems. Well, they finally let me out of jail, and I ended up working over at Huther Doyle. Now, George Huther, our namesake at Huther Doyle, we're just one of the 10 or so outpatient programs in town. And so we are very much about recovery, needless to say. And George Huther was from the Huther family. They had the old company down on University Avenue there. And George went out about 40 plus years ago, because Huther Doyle's about 40 years old, went out to the Twin Cities for treatment for a case of alcoholism that he had developed. And he came back to the Rochester area and observed that there wasn't a lot of help for people in this town, and shouldn't we do something? And thank God George and others since that time certainly have worked to develop what we now have as part of our treatment system. And George sent personally and hired staff who also helped to send dozens, hundreds, probably thousands of people to treatment and to provide support for them when they came back. And what we would like to see, I think, are communities of sobriety. Communities where people recognize that this is an illness, recognize that some people need treatment and need help, recognize that the preponderance of people, we want to have, at least get some awareness and so on, so that they don't go down that road to the addictive process, as was mentioned earlier. But think about a community of recovery and what that could look like, where people are welcomed into a community where it's okay to be a sober kid in Fairport. You know, I go out and talk with groups in a lot of communities. I ask young people, how many of you know somebody who's in trouble with alcohol or other drugs? Every hand goes up. How many of you know somebody, a young person in recovery? 2 hands out of 30. That's a problem. That's a concern. Maybe, and there's another challenge, I guess, in addition to maybe looking at some of our own behaviors for some of us. What can we do in a community such as this to sort of raise the bottom? You know how an alcoholic sort of kind of hit bottom and so on. And there are things you can do, like that TV show Intervention, you know, to sort of raise the bottom, right? You know, what can we do to kind of raise the bottom of our community where it is not okay to abuse substances in this school, in this town, in our parks, on our streets, in our cars? What can we do to sort of raise that bottom and make it uncomfortable to be a substance abuser? To make it, as people get uncomfortable with the behavior, to make it more accessible to receive help and to be received back into the community with open arms. To provide support for people in recovery. To provide hope for those who are afflicted with addictions. And as a quick aside, addictions are not limited to drugs, okay? There are addictions to gambling, sex and relationships, other kinds of behaviors, even food, for some, even food. So to make it acceptable and supported to be a person in recovery from an addictive condition in our community, what would that look like? What would that look like in terms of guidelines that parents implement for their kids? What would that look like in terms of a balanced law enforcement approach? What would that look like in terms of accessibility to treatment in an immediate kind of way? Currently, and I mentioned we had this treatment system that we've developed locally and beyond. And we were doing a pretty good job some years ago, and then things changed, and you know, we all became interested, I guess, in a whole bunch of other things until this opiate epidemic came back. And we had a tsunami. We have a tsunami, and our levee's about 4 foot high. We don't have the services we need. We're trying like heck, some of us, to get those services, but we need advocacy, because there just isn't enough, as we've seen over the last few years, this heroin epidemic and all that goes along with it, hitting and consuming parts of our community. Let's be concerned about marijuana. Not only because there might be fentanyl in it, but as was mentioned earlier, it is a potentially addictive drug. I hear all the time, well, it's going to be legal. Okay, legality has nothing to do with being healthy, right? Okay, you know, cigarettes are legal for everybody over the age of 18. Alcohol's legal for everybody over the age of 21. And any of us could go out and sniff gasoline if we chose to. Okay? I would generally not recommend either of the first two, and would certainly not recommend the third. Okay? All legal. Legality doesn't necessarily define healthy or even okay behavior. But let's be concerned about marijuana. It's very strong stuff. You know? We had just a little bit of very, very quick information, then we're going to have time for other things. I'll just have to inform a little bit. You know, the concentration of the substance has a whole lot to do with the addictive potential and what happens when people use. Again, we're concerned about, you know, heroin, stronger heroin, fentanyl, because these present and provide different dosages. Obviously, the higher the dose, the more potential for addiction, the more severe the consequence. Well, you know, cocaine starts out as a leaf down in typically South America. Many people chew the leaf. It's sort of the equivalent to a Starbucks cup of coffee. Doesn't cause a lot of problems. But when we import that, we have to bring it across the border. And you can't run across the border with a tree very easily. So we put it into powder form, but that's not good enough. We get it here and we put it into a rack. Okay? That's become, in some ways, a very different drug, hasn't it? It's no longer a cup of coffee. Well, the marijuana that your brother may have smoked out behind Uncle Ralph's shed, 30 years ago, is not the marijuana of today. 7 to 8% THC then. Good marijuana today, which, by the way, smells. Not just when it burns, it smells when it's raw. So if you go in your kid's room and it smells like dirty socks, and that's not a good example because there are a lot of dirty socks in your kid's room. But yeah, it kind of has that odor, okay? Cheese, unpleasant kind of odor. This is before it's burnt, okay? It's because there's such a high concentration of THC, and it doesn't look like the little, cute little leaves of yesteryear. It looks like a gooey Christmas tree with hydroponics and genetic engineering. But that's not good enough. We need hash oil and other concentrations to take up 60 to 70% THC, but that's not good enough. We have in the last couple of years developed dabbing, okay, which is sort of like marijuana crack. THC concentration 85 to 93%, and you basically smoke it in something that looks like a crack pipe with a blowtorch. That's where we are. That's where we are. So let's be concerned about that too. Let's be concerned about alcohol. Let's be concerned, as somebody said, about the e-cigs. And it's probably not so much the nicotine necessarily as you really don't know what is floating around in that tank. Okay. Let's be concerned about related behaviors, the kinds of relationships our kids are having. Let's be concerned about what activities they're involved with. We do know that positive social supports and engagement and positive activities have a whole lot to do with reducing the likelihood of someone developing an addiction. So with that, I'll close with those challenges to you as concerned, caring, involved parents to examine some of your own behaviors, some of the things we may take for granted ourselves. Challenge you to think about what you can do within your own locus, your family, your friends, activities, you're involved with the school, other things, to promote Fairport as a healthy community where recovery is embraced and welcomed. And I challenge you to develop ways to make Fairport a community where it is not okay to be an abuser of drugs, where there's consequence, yet at the same time there's some offerings of recovery and hope and change for those who run into difficulties with these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. So now we're going to have the question and answer portion of the evening. So I'm going to invite the panel members to join us up on stage. At this time, if you have questions, please write them on your index card, pass them to the aisle, and our CPAC volunteers will gather them, and we will read your questions. But please, panel members, come on up and have a seat. So if you have a question for a specific panel member, write that on your card. But if you have already handed your card in, we'll figure that out. All right, we have a very esteemed panel, lots of adults from our community and some students as well. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Miles to start at the end. Tell us, and have each panel member kind of go down the row and tell us your name and your title. And students, you can tell us your grade.
Okay, I'm Deb Miles. I'm the Director of Student Services here in the district.
Good evening, Dean Dunn, Principal at Martha Brown Middle School. Pat Grove, Principal at Joanna Perrin.
Emma Mashera, Senior Student Representative.
Jordan O'Connor, junior, and junior class president too, if you guys are interested.
Good evening, I'm Pam Strani, I'm the principal here at Minerva Deland School.
Good evening, I'm Bob Clark, the principal at Fairport High School. Hello, Sam Farina with the Fairport Police Department.
Carly Payne, Jr. and Junior Class Vice President.
Hi, I'm Luna, I'm a sophomore. I'm Caitlin, and I'm a senior.
Hi, I'm Margaret Osler, and I am a high school youth minister at Church of the Resurrection, and I'm a parent.
Deborah Tandoy, I am the asset coordinator for the Fairport Parenting Community and the co-chair of CPAC.
Greg Johnson, COO at Heather Doyle.
Gary Henderson.
Charlie Henderson, 2014 Fairport.
Great. So our first question, I'm going to start right off with Chief over there. Chief, thank you for being here tonight. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the trends you're seeing in Fairport and maybe some of the calls you responded to and things we might want to be aware of?
Sure. Thanks very much for the question. I just wanted to acknowledge a few of my colleagues in the audience. Sergeant Matt Barnes is with us tonight, Sergeant Mike Thomas from the Sheriff's Office, and also Officer Matt Weber in the back, who's good enough to join us here tonight. But some of the things we're seeing was brought out by Craig Johnson, incredible amount of overdose, drug-related, opioid type of situations throughout the county happening on a daily basis with overdose, to the point that Narcan is becoming kind of routine for the folks that are using drugs to have on hand so that they can revive themselves. It's become that bad. So we're very conscious of this situation. We are moving in a direction from a task force standpoint for Monroe County to address that. And one of the second trends that is quite alarming to us as well is the amount of mental health related police calls for service that we're receiving, to a point that we've recently started up a crisis intervention team concept throughout Monroe County, that we have specially trained officers just to deal with the mental health issues. So those two types of things from a trends is going on routinely today, which we find very concerning, and it really is changing the manner in which we provide police services to the community.
Thank you. I've got a lot of questions for the students. You're very popular tonight. So we're going to start by the question that we talk about a lot. What is the best way to say no to peer pressure? And what are the positive things you have going on in your lives that help you say no when the time comes?
So we are really faced with like a lot of these circumstances, a lot and very often, and it is really important to like have your values and things like that, and things that you like stand for. So when we're faced with these circumstances, me personally, I really like, I don't know how to really explain it, like, it's the way that you can't really let it.
Personally, for me, I do not have a lot of peer pressure. Like, I am around it. There's been many situations where I've been around it, but the whole idea is more for them. So they're not too apt, I guess, to push it on people. Yeah, they'll be like, hey, do you want to try it? But honestly, if you just tell your kid to say no, if they're really their friends, then they're okay with that. Also, it helps if your kids are going to parties and stuff. At least what helps for me is if you grow with a group of friends that you know are also going to say no. It's kind of like strength in numbers, I guess. That helps.
I would say saying no is a lot easier when you have someone else to blame it on. So I'm going to pick on my mom real quick. She's in the crowd somewhere. My mom said, if you're ever in a sticky situation, you can always blame me. I can always be your scapegoat or your lame person that makes you come home. So lucky that I have my license. She doesn't have to come out at 12:30 and pick me up from someplace. Not that I would be driving after 9. But, you know, there are times times where I have said, you know what, guys, I can't, make it tonight because I know that there's going to be a sticky situation that I don't want to get myself in. So I'll be like, you know what, my mom's being super lame, and she said I got to be home because I have work the next day. So.
How do you teach the Fifth Amendment here?
Kind of bouncing off about what Jordan said, is me personally with my parents, we have a code word. So if I'm in an uncomfortable situation, our code word is, are we gonna have pizza tomorrow? Especially if I'm like at a late place with my friends, then it's not like, are we having pizza tonight? Because obviously like it's 9 o'clock and I'm not having dinner. So I will often text my mom, are we having pizza tomorrow night? And she says yes, and that's my like, I know that she's gonna come and get me, and then I'm kind of like, I don't really feel good. So I think it's a really good idea. I know a few of my other friends who also have like a code word, and I think it's a good way to like get out of these sticky situations without making like a super awkward situation for yourself.
Okay, those are great ideas, thank you. Couple questions, might be for the principals down there. People are really reluctant to tell you when things are going on, and they're really concerned about what might happen. So what might happen when a student does violate the code of conduct, and or if a parent calls you with a concern, does that mean their student is going to be in big trouble?
I guess I'll jump in and start. I think that it's important for everybody to understand that we don't make any assumptions when these situations occur. And I think that in general, our hope is to form a partnership and share information with families. If something's reported and we investigate, we do our level best to maintain dignity for students as they go through this process, and to understand that, first and foremost, they can't say that there isn't a problem, because if they're in our office, it's clearly a problem. But also to understand that parents and families are hurting. And so, generally speaking, from the start, as we move through this process, we share information and we guide them through what we're trying to accomplish. There certainly is a consequence piece of school, but our focus is on a helping contract generally, and trying to establish a partnership where we can provide information for families so that they know what they're dealing with. So, when I see a student for alcohol or drugs, etc., I don't have enough information to say that they're an abuser of those situations. It might be the first time, and maybe for all of us concerned, that would be the best outcome. This was the first time. They weren't intelligent about it. They got caught, and that's fantastic, because I can intervene early. But it could be a very serious situation. So, our work with Mrs. Russell is to establish that partnership with families and to send them for a comprehensive evaluation so that you can, as families, make informed decisions about how to support them.
Just to add to that, I would encourage you to stay connected with the parents of your children's friends as early as 5th, 6th, for instance. When you start hearing new names coming to your house, when you start seeing new behaviors with your children, please stay tuned, stay focused, stay connected, all the way through high school, making sure that you know the friends that your children are hanging with. I'd also say that our mental health staff at our schools are incredibly trained. We all have full-time counselors, school psychologists, and social workers. The minute you see some changes, get to your child's counselor. Within a day, they can get to your child's team of teachers at the middle school to see what they're seeing in the classrooms. So within our schools, we've got great resources. Feel free to take advantage of them at the earliest sign that you see.
Thank you. I'm not sure, Craig, this might be for you. Can you explain more what DABs are and how are they made?
DABs are a highly concentrated form of marijuana, essentially, and what you can find it on YouTube, like everything else today. Okay, go on YouTube and look up dabs, and they'll probably do a better story visually than I can. But essentially, you take about a tube full of marijuana and process it in a way that is not entirely separate or entirely different from how you process the leaves and the plants of cocaine into powder. Okay, and this tube is processed, and it comes out afterwards. It's just sort of a little glob that's described typically, it's kind of like earwax is how people describe it, sort of a white, yellow, waxy substance, which is essentially the distilled marijuana plants. So you don't have to worry about all that smoke and all that smell and all that waste. You can get right to the core of the matter with the dabs, this gooey, and because of that, of course, it's not as flammable nearly as the dried leaves were before this whole process. That's why you need the blowtorch. The pipe that's used is not a bong or a cigarette, a marijuana cigarette, or a blunt, or a joint, or a pipe, or anything of that nature. It really looks like a crack pipe. It's usually a tube with a little tiny screen and burning spot at the top and a blowtorch to light it up. Take about one hit. Most users describe the effect as kind of getting like hit in the head for about 10 or 15 minutes because it's such an intense blast of the chemical. And then after that, you're high for a long time.
Liz, can you just add something to that real quick? Sure. A concerning thing I think about the dabs, just from my vantage point as a high school principal, is that can be used in an e-cig. So, I think that the news on e-cigs and understanding what they are or what they aren't, many times I think parents might present us with the thought process that they're harmless, that they've read about them and they think they're no big deal. Aside from the very large concentration of nicotine, which I try to equate to sticking maybe 6 or 7 cigarettes in your mouth and smoking all at once, but dabs can be burned in an e-cig, as can dry leaves. So it's really important to understand, when you have an e-cig situation, you need to investigate what's in the e-cig, and Chief can share with you that you can actually test that to understand if it's just drops. So it's very concerning for us to find the dabs with an e-cig.
I just want to add that, just for sort of a reality dose, that the last 2 years at Minerva Land, we've gotten phone calls because 9th graders have dabbed and they've ended up in the emergency room department. It's so potent and it's so scary, and it's often leading to kids being out of school for a long time for medical reasons. So, and also in terms of the e-cigs and the use of e-cigs, we talk with our 9th graders every month when we do our leadership asset training about how e-cigs differ from old school cigarettes in the behavior of them. So when students are beginning to use e-cigs, it feels much more like drugs and that subculture. Kids are trading parts, they're sneaking them, they're selling, they're trying out different doses, and it's just a sneaky subculture that accompanies e-cigs. It's different than 16 years ago when I'm pulling a pack of cigarettes out of a girl's purse that falls out when she's 17. It's just a different feeling, and it escalates so quickly that because of the increased dosage, kids are becoming addicted, and they truly have challenges getting it through the day without using them.
So to follow up on that, one person asks, can we get rid of the vape shop in Fairport?
Well, I can tell you publicly that they were recently violated for selling to underage folks. So they are on notice, and they will be tested frequently over the next several months to ensure that they are selling to the right age group. Otherwise, they will, in essence, lose their license and be sanctioned by the Department of Health.
Another hat, as a village board member, we have no say what businesses are coming into our locations. And what you need to do is whoever owns the businesses and gets people to come into your locations, you need to get to those store owners and tell them what it's doing to our community and how we're against it. So we have tried, and there's really nothing we can do about it at this point.
So I would toss this out to the students. Do you think your peers are buying their vapes from the shop, or where do you think they're getting their vapes?
I think personally, at least from what I've seen, they're getting it from, honestly, their older brother and sisters. I've heard a lot of college kids, they'll get it for kids in our grade. Also, surprisingly, parents. I've had lots of friends where their parents vape and they just borrow their parents' stuff.
Also, as a senior, there's once you turn 18, it's a big step in your senior year. And a lot of kids that maybe 17, they go to the kids that are 18 and they're like, hey, you're 18, look me up. And you're like, oh. I'm 17, I'm young, but I see it happen in my school every day.
To add to that, me personally, I don't know about the other grades, but for the class 2020, the sophomores, I do know a lot of people who have gotten it from the shop in the village. That is like a big place. So the word for the people who you get this stuff is you'd say, my plug's gonna hook me up. Like the plug is like where you can get your weed farm or your drops for your e-cigarette. So a lot of times the village is a big place where like you meet up, like I'm gonna go meet up with my plug to get my stuff, you know, exactly.
Here's a parent who sounds like they're doing all the right things. How do I prevent any drug use at a party when I already prohibit bags, knapsacks, etc. from entering the home? Any suggestions from the panel?
Being visible, you know, being right there, being present when the party's happening, mingling, saying hello, talking to the friends, getting to know the kids that are there. You're there, if you're in front of the kids, it's not going to happen. You know, you can prevent it, you can try to see what they're bringing in, but if they're downstairs in their basement or out in the backyard or out in the bonfire, and you're not there with them, anything can go.
They're very like sneaky looking, especially the e-cigarettes, they're very thin and they're easy to sneak around. So it's not like it's impossible to stop people from bringing them in, but it's and the water bottles and things like that, that's how most of the alcohol is sneaked in the parties. So it is hard, like I'm not a parent, but like, you know, this is Russell's.
Yes, I actually have a question for our audience, and that's how many parents who are here tonight would like to get a phone call if a parent finds out that there was alcohol or other drugs in their home and your child was there? So just take a look around, and I think that there's a lot of power in that, because so many of us, and as a mom of a 14-year-old and an almost 17-year-old, I feel that pressure as well. Not that I have honestly had this experience, but we hear about that pressure from our kids not to tell. I'll take care of it, Mom, they won't happen again, that sort of thing. But just know that there's strength in these connections, and it's one of the reasons that we have these meetings, so that you can know that it's a partnership. It's a partnership with the school, with the community, and with each other. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that's what we want is that phone call.
Just add on to a little bit of what Pam said, and maybe go back to something that David said earlier. You know, it's not uncommon for us to hear from a parent that they tried to do all those right things, and then they went upstairs and somebody came in the door below, or snuck in through a window, and they brought stuff with them. And again, I guess to be present, and I know this is maybe back from when I grew up, but if you don't know the parents of every kid that's in your home, then maybe they shouldn't be there. And I think that we sometimes worry about, when we meet with CPAC, we talk with our kids, there's this degree of like, how much do you want to embarrass your kid? But that's your right as a parent. Call those parents, let them know who's there, what they're doing, where they're going, what the whole content of the night is. And in fact, maybe you come with them, get to know their parents. I think that that's the best thing that you can do, is to stay in tune with what's going on. They don't have the right to privacy in your basement. They really don't. It's your home. You have to be conscious of what's in it. And we're negligent if we don't. I have 3 kids myself. And we would do that. We do that all the way up when we do play dates. We don't leave our kids alone. Why would we do that in our basements where they can hide? Okay?
Going off of what Luna said, that it's sneaky and stuff, one story I guess that I have is I was in a car with somebody and they passed back a pen looking thing. It looked like a pen. And I know about this stuff. I know what it usually looks like. So she's like, oh, you want to try? I was like, it's a pen. What do you want me to do with it? I don't have paper. It was actually a vape thing. So going back to the question with the bags and stuff, even if they just have a pen looking thing in their pocket, it could really be a vape. It looked like a pen. It had a clicker. I don't know.
And also, we talk about it a lot. What's in your medicine cabinet? The Realtor Association is to the point that if anybody's selling their house and they are asked to take everything out of their medicine cabinets, because that's where people are getting a lot of their drugs. So what's in your medicine cabinet? And make sure that it's cleared out and there's nothing unsafe. And if you have a need to have something, make sure that you have that monitored and taken care of.
haven't mentioned cell phones, but don't feel guilty if you look at your child's cell phone. They're living histories as to what they're doing, especially on weekends. So have a conversation with your child. Most of you are paying big bucks to have your children have these $800 phones. Feel free to monitor your child's cell phone usage. It's amazing what's on there because they're counting on adults not looking at that.
A lot of people are very appreciative of the Hendersons and want to know if your video's online and how they can find that.
It is. We've got a Facebook public page that says How Addiction Happens. And then if you go on YouTube, search How Addiction Happens. And then there's a website, howaddictionhappens.com. So you can find any of those places. Thank you.
So I see the clock says 8:30 and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'll thank the panel very much. So we'll make sure we find a way to answer all these questions. So again, I'm going to have Mr. Provenzano come up and send us off.
Good to see you. Please, could you go around the house to our esteemed panel? As a parent, I'm overwhelmed. I'm also reassured. As a superintendent, as an educator, I am proud. I am proud of our community. I'm proud of you for coming out tonight. Please remember, our partnership is vital, and we rely on each other because they're all our kids, like our friends from the asset leaders and those incredible wisdom and advice there. So please drive safely. Know that your children are our #1 priority.